So, solve for right to figure it right and find the perimeter. So, Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Which one has to be c? Which variable expression? X plus 1. And then a and b are interchangeable. So x squared plus x minus 1 squared. Everybody okay with that? All good? Okay. Everybody okay with that? When you square a binomial, you don't just square the terms. You need to actually do the multiplication. So, for example, x minus 1 squared would be x minus 1 times x minus 1. And whether you learned FOIL or distributive law, x times x is x squared, x times negative 1 is negative x, negative 1 times x is negative x, negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. The negative x plus the negative x is negative 2x. Whenever you square a binomial in terms of saving time, the first term is always the first term squared, the last term is always the last term squared and is always positive. The middle term is double the product of either the inner or the outer. So in other words, negative x times 2. And for that same reason, the one on the right is x squared plus 2x plus 1. Any questions about that idea? That algebraic idea? Now I'm going to collect like terms. 2x squared minus 2x plus 1 equals x squared plus 2x plus 1. What do the plus 1s do to each other right away? Cancel out. Now, my recommendation is set it up so that the x squared term is positive. So I'm going to subtract x squared and minus 2x from both sides. Everything on the right-hand side does what? Cancels. Everything on the right-hand side does what? Cancels out, leaving you with 0. On the left-hand side, I'm going to have x squared minus 4x equals 0. Now, it's not a trinomial, but it's a binomial with a GCF. What term goes into both x squared and negative 4x? What variable? Just little old what? X. So I pull that out. Alright, now, what's the opposite of negative 4? Positive 4. Please recall that another possible solution, if there's an x on the outside, it's just 0. Whenever you factor out a GCF, which is a variable, 0 is added to your solution. Everybody good? Okay, now, if I use the 0, what happens when I plug it into the smallest side, the x minus 1? What type of number do I get? Negative 1. Can I have a negative length? No. So therefore 0 is what we call, of course, what? Extraneous. Alright. Now when I plug in the 4, you get 4, 4 minus 1, which is 3, and 4 plus 1, which is 5. And to get the perimeter, I add them all up, and I get 12. For the perimeter. Units, whatever it is. That's the only higher order algebra problem you would have as a quadratic, and it looks just like that. It's just the variable expressions would be different. Alright? So that's the only higher order algebra you would have. Make sense? Okay, the sliding ladder problem. Alright? A 205-foot ladder is placed against the wall in such a way that the base of the ladder lies 45 feet away from the bottom of the wall. So there's 45, there's 205. Everybody okay with that? Because they're going to use descriptions like base. I have two sides of a triangle. What can I use to get the third side? Pythagorean theorem. I'm going to call that B. 45 squared plus B squared equals 205 squared. B squared equals 40,000. To undo the square, what would you do? Find the what? Square root. And you get 200. Everybody good? Okay. Now, the ladder slides down the wall in such a way that the top of the ladder now lies on the wall 164 feet away from the bottom of the wall. Is the ladder still 205? You betcha. What theorem, once again, do you have to use? Pythagorean. 164 squared plus B squared equals 205 squared. Once again, how would you undo the square? Square root. B equals 123. Originally, how far was the bottom of the ladder away from the wall? 45. When we end up, it's 123. How would you figure out how much it moved? What would you do with the 123 and 45? Subtract. We get 70. Good? Alright, and last one for today. What is the longest pole that can be placed in a rectangular prism-shaped box with dimensions 30 inches by 2 feet by 15 inches, round to the nearest inch? So everything is in inches except for this one dimension. So my suggestion for you is I would convert that into what? Inches. Make sense? Okay, so that's going to be 24 inches. Alright, now here's the visual. We're going to give you the long way and then we'll give you the short way. So here's my box. Now, the one process in which we have to think about today. How do I put the pole in the box to maximize the length I can do? Diagonal. But which diagonal? Actually, agree diagonal. Think 3D. Corner to corner. Does that make sense, everybody? And it doesn't matter which corner, it's still going to come out to be the same. You agree? Okay. So, visually what we're talking about is this. The back, let's say we use the back right to the front left. Okay. Now, if it's a rectangular prism, that's a right angle, correct, on the bottom? Alright? So, I'm going to make this 30, and I'm going to make that 24. You could use the 15, it's not going to matter. You can use it in any order you want. Alright, so the order doesn't matter in which you do these problems. So I'm going to do 30 squared plus 24 squared. And I get 1476. That's the square root of 1476. Do not do anything else with it. Leave it just like that. Do not do anything else with it. Leave it just like that. Because then, what's the number I haven't used yet? I've used 30. I've used 24. What haven't I used? 15. And then I'm going to do Pythagorean theorem again. So it's the square root of 1476 squared plus 15 squared equals the final answer squared. I'm going to call it D squared. And from last week, that's the reason I leave it like that, because what happens when I square a square root? What do they do to each other? Cancel out. That's a 1476 plus. I apologize for my penmanship. I'm going to add those up, and I get 1701 equals D squared. And then I'm going to do what for my final answer? Find the what? Square root. I rounded because what does it say in the instructions to round? More on that in a second. But my final answer is 41.24. So in this problem, it doesn't matter if I rounded that to the nearest inch. What would my final answer be? To the nearest inch, 41.24 would be what? 41. Now, what if it came out to be 41.6? What would happen if I tried to put a 42-inch box hole into that box? Wouldn't fit. So for these problems, you always round. Not always in Pythagorean theorem problems. For this particular problem, do you understand you always round down? Okay, so that's number one. So we get that. Number two. Here's a shortened version for you. We're going to call it the 3D Pythagorean theorem. D squared equals the square root of A squared plus B squared plus C squared. And you'll still get the same answer. So if you have a three-dimensional problem where you're trying to find the diagonal, you can just use that and you'll get the same answer each and every time. We're going to work on more of these this week. So tomorrow we're going over 8.1 for the first part of class, then we'll do more word problems together. Wednesday we'll do 8.2, go over more word problems together, Wednesday. Thursday you take your quiz on 8.1 and 8.2. Friday's your notebook test. The only difference between the last notebook test and this one, the major difference is this: chronological order, but I'm not going to tell you where it is in your notes. So you have to remember where everything is in your notes. And when there's more people here tomorrow, we'll tell you exactly where it starts and where it ends. Okay? Friday, you'll then get the quarterly review. We'll go over the first half of the quarterly review, most likely on Monday. We'll go over the second half on Tuesday. You'll take your quarterly on Wednesday, and then we will start the limited amount of trig we do either Monday after the first half of the review or on Tuesday or Thursday. Okay? Everybody good? The sheet you got on Friday with the sum is completely for you. And there's a video up for a couple problems, for one problem I know people struggle with. I also put up a video for this one. For those of you struggling with that one, remember with a circle, the radius is always exactly the... So if this is 6,370 over here, then this segment from there to there is also what? 6,370. That's the hypotenuse. That part is 350. That's 6,370. What do you do to get the hypotenuse for those two numbers? Add them up. Okay? The other one people struggled with, and it isn't a big deal. Okay? Well, there's two that apparently people struggle with from what I was told. This one, when they say an equilateral triangle is an altitude of 15 meters, And altitude is the same thing as the height, is the same thing as the perpendicular bisector. Alright, which means this segment here is the 15, there's the 60, use 30, 60, 90 triangles like we talked about last week to find that side, but again, that's up to you. Alright, if it's not in the homework and it's not in the word problems we go over together, alright, it's not on the quiz. So if it's on here and it's not in the homework and it's not on the word problems, don't worry about it. Got me? So this was just extra problems for you to do. Alright, you got about 25 minutes. You want to come up and ask any questions if you struggle with anything, or you just want to work on that, whatever you want to do. The next 25 minutes is yours. Have yourself a lovely